This program is brought to you by Emory University.
On March 25, 2014, the Center for Faculty Development and Excellence at Emory University hosted a panel discussion titled Trolls, When Response to Public Scholarship is Uncivil. The participants related their own experiences of dealing with hostile reactions to their work in the public sphere, including personal attacks and even threats of violence, how they dealt with such incivility in such situations, and what motivates them to continue public scholarship despite the hazards. The panelists were Deb Howry, Vice Chair for Research and Associate Professor in the Department of Emergency Medicine, Emory School of Medicine, and Associate Professor in the Department of Behavioral Science and Health Education and the Department of Environmental Health at the Rollins School of Public Health, Rob Stevenson, Associate Professor in the Hubert Department of Global Health at the Rollins School of Public Health, and Tressie McMillan Cottom, a graduate student in the Department of Sociology in the Laney Graduate School at Emory. We hope you enjoy these highlights from the program.
We actually weren't going to do PowerPoints. We saw this kind of more as a discussion, and so this clip can kind of just, I think, inspire us to talk a little bit about things.
Dr. Ali, I'm calling regarding your article, Stemming Domestic Abuse Epidemic in the Atlantic, and I just wanted to let you know how disgusted I am at the sexism in this article, especially for a nation just riveted by the Jodiah Soraya story and the general bigotry that we men face when it comes to domestic violence, rape, child abuse, you name it, from feminists. This article has nothing, never mentions once that women commit domestic violence in large numbers, and that the Violence Against Women Act is a bigoted travesty of federal law, or that, that generally feminists lie, cheat, and steal using domestic violence, false stats and everything in this area. And it'd be really nice to see a doctor, particularly, who has got to see some men coming into her emergency room speak about female violence, the dark side of women, vice, the reason. There's lots of reasons why men commit domestic violence, including the abuse that women are able to get away with proxy violence, and also just generally nasty childhoods, which often are caused by both women and men. Women commit the majority of child abuse in this country. So it's just really disgusting to see you put out such sexist trash in these days when the information is getting out more and more often that women are equally violent. In fact, initiate the majority of domestic violence incidents, and yet hardly ever get any attention. So please do better next time. Thank you.
The piece that he was responding to, I thought, was one of my most balanced pieces, actually. It was in the Atlantic, and it was using Ariel Castro, who had actually had a history of domestic violence, and I talked about the need for better intervention programs and intervening early in childhood abuse cases, because he also had said that he was abused as a child. And I didn't substantiate either of those. I just used that as a global example. And I didn't say that women couldn't be perpetrators. I just used a male as an example. And I also talked about how Charles Ramsey, who had found the women, also had a history of domestic violence, but actually intervened in a case that he thought was domestic. And so what made the two men different? And that was the most commented piece in the Atlantic that month. And I didn't know when it was going live, except that then I started getting emails in my inbox, including that missed phone call. And that's when I said, oh, I guess it's posted now. Mm-hmm. I realized there's people out there that still need to be educated about different topics, and that I didn't engage with them on the comments because many of those people might not be ready to have an educated dialogue about things. But my thought is, for the number of people that didn't like the piece, there's 10 to 20, maybe even 100 times as many that do like the piece that just don't feel as impassioned to say something like good job or thumbs up. So I just kept thinking, if that many people don't like it, there's how many more out there that did like it, and the number of people that might actually, it might resonate with and have a positive impact.
The very first one I wrote actually went in the Huffington Post, and it was all about why there are no same-sex male couples of color on TV. which I challenge you is still defined. There are not all on mainstream TV, and why that's important from a role modeling approach. And it turned out to be the most commented Huffington Post piece of the week, which was interesting for my first experience of writing op-ed. And it was a real learning experience in what my responsibility is as an author of these. It really taught me that my responsibility is to put the piece out there and to create public discourse, not be part of that public discourse. You know, the excitement of writing this first piece, and then you start reading the comments, and then you discover that.
That's where you went wrong.
Yeah. the comment section is where, you know, intellect and decency go to die. You know, it took a while to realize that having a lot of negative comments is exactly the point. That's why I write these, is to actually get people talking. The most commented piece I had was a piece that went on CNN, which was why the stress of growing up gay can be bad for your health. We received 4,000 comments, and this is in a week when there was like a war going on, an election going on, and people were more worried about this. It started out as an op-ed piece. Then once the comments rolled in, they moved it to the news story. Yeah. So it became a news story on the front page of the news, which just allowed it to snowball. Of the 4,000 comments, you know, it was equally 2,000 negative, 2,000 positive, you know, because, and this was really difficult not to, because it was a lot of the comments were really personal, you know. I also got hate mail and death threats via email for this one as well, which, you know, you do have to send to the Emory police just to have them on file. And how do you respond to, again, I think, because that was probably the 8th or 9th I've written, by then I was a bit more seasoned, I'm like, I'm not going to get involved. You know, the fact that there's 2,000 of each means there's great public discourse, my job is done. I'm actually more disappointed when there's 0 comments, because you're like, kind of flopped. You know, I see that as a negative. The last piece I wrote was, it went in the LA Times, about unusual graduate course names. And I wrote it out of frustration, so I'm on the admissions committee and I read transcripts. And if you've done street fighting mathematics, which is a real course at MIT, I have no idea what you studied. And so it's all about the tension of, you need to get people in your class with an exciting title, but no one else knows what you taught. I got a really lovely email from the professor of street fighting mathematics at MIT, really nice, who wrote me this email saying, you are exactly right. I call it street fighting mathematics to be vague and to get people in this. Right. And in the fall, I'm changing it to ninja mathematics.
Much better. The problem is things that resonate with people is not a comfortable experience for a lot of people. Okay, so, and what people can then graph onto you about, I think they often graph the intensity of what you intended to communicate onto the intensity of the emotion you made them feel. Right, which of course is rarely the case because you do not know them. And what I find overwhelmingly is that it is easy for people to sort of strip away the humanity of the engagement online, right? The tools themselves make that really super easy to do, and that's by design. I'm also an organizational theorist, but that's by design. And so people can share it easily. The whole point of being viral and being easy to share with people is to make it easy to strip all of that stuff away, right? What you have done, though, when you have somebody stop long enough to feel something about what you've written, is you've disrupted how they normally engage any kind of content. So of course they feel some kind of way. And then the tool makes it super easy for them to immediately respond to it. So my first thing is, yes, do not read the comments. This is not peer review, right? Where public discourse, however, has furthered my intellectual development, or hopefully I have furthered someone else's, has been the people who will contact you directly. Overwhelmingly, it's people saying, I never thought of that. You know? Thank you, right? I never thought of that. I made the mistake of writing about Miley Cyrus. For whatever reason, that piece really, really resonates with people. People feel deeply, for whatever reason, about Miley Cyrus. Yeah, it was the most popular piece that was on, eventually went on Slate. It was the most popular one for a couple of months, actually, which is really bizarre. You're talking about tens of thousands of people. I think the first thing about that is to realize just how significantly different the scope of that audience is from what we are accustomed to. And that one was about poverty and status symbols and why do poor people buy these things. And that one is also taken on a life of its own. a lot of emotional responses to that one. I think that one resonated with people just on a very personal level. And so to the extent that I've had negative feedback about that, it's mostly because people can't believe that I would write it. Right? To them, it feels very naked and very, and I think they think I feel exposed. You know, I'm talking about social capital and mobility basically in the piece. I'm not using the formal words, but that's all I'm talking about. I can no longer take for granted that they're using those same definitions or those same sort of frameworks. So the first thing I have to understand is that we're often having two very different conversations. The most negative reaction has been from a piece that I wrote about academia. So there you go. We talk about the trolls out there, but I think we got a few of our own. And so those are the people who felt most comfortable doing stuff like Deb, right? Calling me and emailing me directly kind of thing, because that's the way we would do in our discourse, right? Only they're not responding to something academic, they're responding to something public, and they're kind of conflating their roles as both, and you know, I can contact you directly. Overwhelmingly men, I will say this is there's a very much a gendered aspect to it. My last read of everything I publish is always, if it comes to it, do I stand by this? And if so, I'd never think about it again.
Another way to look at the negative comments on your op-ed pieces or like the trolling is they've proven your point for you, particularly when you write about discrimination. And lots of mine deal with the health effects of homophobia and trying to repackage same marriage equality as a health issue. The moment, and my articles talk about, there is all this kind of homophobia and negative stress, then when you have 2,000 people writing negative, I'm like, told you so. There it is. I win. And so that's a win. The way in which constantly reviewing our comments shapes how we write. And something. Yes. So when I wrote my very first one for HuffPo about same-sex couples on TV, completely naive. I'm like, yes, it's the best thing ever. You know, publish it. I'm gonna win. And wasn't ready for the comments. And then, you know, as I write them, I find myself, which is probably about things, scrutinizing every line, like, what are people going to say about that?
Right.
Who am I going to upset with that?
That's right. You can't.
And it's really difficult because then you don't want to self-censor. Be careful what you want to be known for.
Yeah.
Because you put yourself out there, as Tracy said, for an audience of like 500,000, and if the Miley Cyrus piece picked up, you find yourself the Miley Cyrus expert really quickly, and that's not what you want it to be.
Exactly.
So whenever I write them, I'm like, if this takes off and I'm on CNN being interviewed, is this what I want to be known as?
I mean, in the op-ed group, we learned kind of that we could say we're an expert on anything, but what I realize is if you're going to go up against some of the trolls, make sure you truly are the expert in some areas. And, sorry, and like for me, for example, most of the work I do is violence against women, so I feel I can write about that. Firearms, I'm passionate about. And as an ER doc, I can say I see a lot of firearm injuries, but if you even look what's happening with a potential Surgeon General nominee right now, you know, his speaking out about firearms a lot is what's keeping him out. And with the shootings in Connecticut and so forth, and just there's always gun violence. There's been a lot of opportunities to write about it. And it's one of the things too I wrestled with my inner demons, kept saying, is this the time to put my neck out there and talk about it? You know, and it's not. I am funded a lot by the federal government. My mentor, his funding, the NRA went after him and he lost, as did the CDC Injury Center, almost all of his funding. Art Kellerman, And so, and he has always said to me, even around the one shooting, I sent him a note saying, do you think I should write a piece? And his response back was like capitals, no, there are others that, you know, there are others that will do this. This is not your time. This is not your fight.
I think perhaps I maybe should take it a bit more seriously than I do. Not really bad. It's kind of, to say it made me happy sounds flippant, but I'm like, yes, it's not the reaction I'm looking for. That's the wrong way to say it, but there is something about a badge of honor, is what I want to say, about like, you know, it just proves my point, you know, and that it made me, the fact that I only got two for the CNN, only 2 death threats, for the CNN piece, but I'm like, there you go, that's the point. And first of all, I was just going to delete them, and I mentioned to my chair, and he said, no, send them to the Emory police.
It happens. It's just going to happen to you. It's more likely to happen to you in a space where you're brushing up against digitally 500,000 people as opposed to 500 in the daily course of your life, right? the nastiness of uncivil discourse weighs heaviest at the intersections of the matrix of domination, meaning it is not the same for everyone participating in those spaces. I think you hear Rob basically saying that as a gay man, and you'll hear me say that always as being a black woman with a particular type of status position, right? It matters that how you're represented and perceived in those spaces, how comfortable people feel dragging you into certain parts of the uncivil discourse that happens in those spaces.
And I think comparing it to the rest of the academic writing I do is important. So, I write a lot of scientific papers for journals, and I write in a scientific fashion. In those, it would be inappropriate for me to couch my opinion as, as a gay man, this is what I feel. But I can take my science and wrap it in my individual circumstances and present it for public discourse. So I almost have two parallel channels. I don't see them as separate, I see them as parallel channels, can't speak. So I write a lot about minority stress and health in a very scientific way, and then I put it out there in the public discourse and talk about my own individual experience and interpretation on that. And they're two different but interconnected things. And, one of my op-eds has led to funding. And this is a classic example of be careful what you write, because it'll come around about you.
The sexiest one, is that what you're talking about?
The sexiest man alive.
Yeah.
I wrote a piece about when Channing Tatum was voted the sexiest man alive, and how it's always been...
You ruined him for me.
I've always been a white man, apart from one, who, we roll out Denzel Washington and say that we're diverse. And I said that Channing Tatum looks like a thumb with eyes. And that phrase... I know.
Exactly.
It got quoted on CNN. It was in the Times of India. So the reason I tell you this is that they announced it, like the Sexy Man Alive, and it just I just got into like, that's so annoying. Again, is this beauty? And then in writing, I'm like, am I out there and my research is here? And I linked it back to role modeling and minority stress. Why can't we have an out gay man who's considered more we probably have had in the history? But so as long as there's some thread, no matter how thin that thread is, I feel okay with it. Even when at the Dancing with the Stars, so you think you can dance, when I predicted the winner, it was all about how you use statistics and how you make statistics digestible to an audience. That's what I want to do.
You also, not only do you have the choice of participating or not, but you have a choice of who you will work with.
Yes.
And I think it's very important. There are some outlets at this point, we've had maybe a couple I won't work with, and there are others who I will engage, and I'm actually very clear about that. I like that you respected my work. I liked that we worked well together, so yes, you can, I will deal with you, and others I won't. And that's absolutely perfectly acceptable. Yeah. So it would be all right in your instance to go, I don't deal with these producers at CNN. However, they may not be the same people at ABC. If universities and institutions want to leverage the power of public scholarship, they have got to provide people with support and cover. Yes. Period. And you have got to do it for the people who are most vulnerable when they participate, the people who would benefit the most from it. So as a minority scholar who does work that is not always mainstream, what public scholarship has given me is a greater community of scholars and potential collaborators. All of my initial publications came from people that I ended up meeting as a result of my public scholarship and in social media. It's been a significant benefit to me in the way that it has expanded and deepened my social networks. However, because I am a minority scholar doing the work that I do, I am more vulnerable.
I feel completely comfortable writing these op-eds at Emory, and I don't feel that I'm ever going to get negative pushback for writing them out. You do need an actual active support system, so having mechanisms in place that you can go to, like, not just death threats one extreme, but I'm receiving character assassinations, is there any, university level support that can be helpful in that? I think that's really important. I'll give one more extreme example is, I know it's on camera, I won't say where, but I interviewed for a position and I didn't get it because of my op-eds. I was told. They said, not because of the content of my op-eds, it's like, would you be willing not to write these if you were here because I'll have us, censor what you write? I'm like, no. So it was like, I wouldn't fit well in that. So there are institutions that won't let you write them. Yeah. So Emory is great in letting you write them, but I think it needs a bit more active support for what you do when it goes wrong.
Yeah.
The preceding program is copyrighted by Emory University.